It's a pleasure to join you, and it's been a good conversation. So hopefully I'll contribute something meaningful to this conversation. Just a little bit about Hughes. We're a combination of satellite operator as well as a technology provider. The markets that we serve run the gamut. I think we're probably best known for the consumer market. We have established a pretty good service in the Americas. We have about 1.5 million terminals that are served with our capacity over the Americas. But we're also providing services in other markets beyond consumer. Sort of consumer-like is community Wi-Fi, which Stefano just talked about. I agree with much of what he just said. It's a way to cost-effectively address people who can't afford to have their own terminal. We also do quite a bit of enterprise managed services. In fact, we provide services to close to 500,000 points of presence, enterprise locations. On the move as well is an important one. Our strategy is a little different from some of the other folks. Our strategy in mobility is really to provide capacity to service providers. And we recently announced an agreement with Inmarsat to provide capacity for them over the Americas. In cellular backhaul, that's a market in developing parts of the world where, again, I think in some ways it's very similar to community Wi-Fi. It's a way that we can lower the CapEx, lower the cost on a per subscriber basis. And then, of course, government and mobility. So today we have, I think, 5 satellites, close to over 400 gigabits of capacity over the Americas. And our next satellite, the Jupiter 3, will bring us more than 500 gigabits of capacity to the market. Unfortunately, that's been delayed due to various complexities. It looks like it'll be launched next year. When that launches, we look forward to utilizing that capacity very quickly. I think somebody made a comment about HTS and utilization. That's not been a problem for us. The utilization has been extremely high on pretty much all of our beams. And if I look at what happened in 2020, and I look at some of these markets, and the impact of the pandemic on the consumer side, as well as digital divide, what we've seen, and again, I echo what Stefano was just talking about, people working from home, governments wanting to provide good services to residents in rural and developing areas has just really driven demand for internet connectivity. And so the challenge for us has been to manage that demand. When we look at other markets, it's, when you look at enterprise, frankly, we saw a lot of enterprises delay investments. And so we've seen a right shifting of many of the enterprise projects that we've been working on. We've also seen a very big trend towards cloud, which means driving more and more capacity, as well as a drive towards software-defined wide area networking. That's been a key driver. And so we're seeing on the enterprise managed services side, companies implementing multi-transport networks where the connections can be fiber, cable, LTE, satellite. And so that has, I think, an impact. And as we see the constellations coming in, the NGSOs, I think that'll be added into the mix. Mobility obviously has been an impact, but we think that that's short term. And the aero market is a long-term market. And we can clearly see airlines making investments. And, you know, it was exciting to see Viasat, frankly, with their success recently. I think it was United, but, you know, congratulations on that. And it's telling that airlines are looking past the pandemic. So I think the mobility market is just a short-term contraction. And military and defense has just continued to be pretty good, not terribly impacted by the pandemic. But in terms of what's going on with regards to the GEO satellite part of the industry, when we look at the satellite, we see some trends. Flexibility of the satellites is clearly happening, and a number of my colleagues here have talked about that. You know, where the satellites are becoming dynamic. We're all trying to get as much capacity onto the satellites as possible, and that's driving us towards using Q and V feeder links, and that has some implications. And we're also just seeing larger systems. You know, when we talk about hundreds and hundreds of gigabits of capacity, those are large, complex systems. And so this is driving some interesting trends, including, I think, extensive virtualization of particularly the gateway systems. That's closely related to both flexible satellites as well as Q and V. The virtualization allows us to basically have a pool of compute power that we can use as needed. And that lends itself towards scalability of the gateway infrastructure. We're also seeing wideband transponders or beams, 500 megahertz or more, and that's pushing towards multi-carrier wideband modems, modulators, demodulators, so that we can have greater efficiency on the gateway side. With Q and V band, there's obviously rain fade, and that's going to happen very, very quickly. So the Q and V band gateways need to be very thin, and that means that we do the processing, the data processing in data centers. And to be able to quickly switch in and switch out a Q and V band feeder station, we are using software-defined networking in order to effectively reconfigure those links. Supporting the flexible satellites means that we need to have APIs to external resource managers so we can quickly reconfigure the ground system and synchronize with the satellite and accommodate the changes. And then finally, with the larger implementations and more systems, we're looking at artificial intelligence and machine learning to drive network operations. From our perspective, one of the trends or things that we're really focused on is getting the best possible remote terminal cost performance. And what we think we've done a pretty good job of doing is driving more and more megabits through the terminal at a lower cost point. And you know, I think one of the keys that's been noted when we look at GEO against NGSOs, the remote terminal is a key advantage of GEO systems. And so being able to drive the terminal cost down while maintaining performance is extremely important as we go forward. We're already, when it comes to network management systems, as I mentioned before, we think that artificial intelligence and machine learning are key technologies that can make us more efficient and translate to happier customers. And we're already using AI and ML to drive our network operations. What we've seen in the US, and we started doing this with our enterprise managed services, is that we can in advance identify likely problems and fix those before they become a problem. So we've been able to reduce truck rolls by 60, I think more than 60%, again, by using artificial intelligence and machine learning, basically gathering lots and lots of information about what's going on and making predictions about that. Of course, we're seeing lots of NGSOs, LEOs, MEOs, and there's a lot of activity that's going on, and that's clearly gonna impact us, and we're part of that. We've invested in OneWeb, and we've also have we're also a technology supplier to OneWeb, and so we believe in NGSOs and LEOs, but our view is that that LEOs are complementary to NGSOs. That when we look at, LEOs are complementary to GEOs, I should say. When we look at when we look at GEO, we're very confident that GEO can bring the lowest cost per bit, that it allows us to focus capacity density where the subscribers are, so we don't have the stranded capacity, and we have the lowest possible terminal cost. And NGSOs bring us coverage and lower latency. And so we think that NGSOs fit well for fill-in, and also, obviously, with low latency applications such as VPNs, there's a value in NGSOs. But as others have noted, doing a LEO constellation is I think it's a challenge when it comes to the economics, and there's many regulatory issues, and of course, the cost of the terminal. That said, again, we think that they're complementary. And so one of our focus areas is on implementing multi-transport solutions. I've mentioned already we're doing multi-transport with LTE and fiber and GEO, and it's only natural to add LEO or MEO to that mix. Just looking forward, 5G is coming, and it's driven by demand for capacity, and it's going to drive a bunch of new applications. What does it mean for our industry? I think it's good news, because 5G, like LTE, is going to drive demand. As we look at it, 5G is going to be really focused on urban areas. As somebody else previously mentioned, there's still many areas in the world where you don't get LTE now. So for the time being, we're going to see LTE continue to be deployed in rural and developing areas. And satellite will continue to be playing a role in backhaul for LTE. And as 5G is deployed in rural and developing areas, I think satellite will have a role again, particularly in terms of backhaul. So that's just a real brief view from Hughes regarding what we see in terms of trends.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you for that excellent presentation. I have a few questions. HNS is I think the only GEO operator that's actually invested in a LEO system. What do you fear any form of cannibalization from customers that are leaving your own on-network that you own fully yourself to moving to OneWeb or Starlink? Is there any concern within your own hallways about that?
Yeah, so there's a couple of responses to that. On one level, there's tremendous demand We look at the market, if we just look at US, which is a market that we know particularly well, we reckon, I think it's somewhere around 17, 18 million locations which are unserved or underserved. And we don't have near enough capacity to be able to serve that market. And so we think that there's plenty of demand to go around. Now, having said that, let's face it, Elon Musk is, he's a one-man marketing machine. He can move markets with just a tweet. So, there's no question that, Elon Musk and Starlink will have an impact on the market. But we think that there's just plenty of demand. And so we feel confident looking forward.
And could you talk a little bit about the terminal pricing and features that you've developed for OneWeb? Can customers expect to get a reliable working system that's going to be affordable and with a manageable level of power consumption?
Yeah, I'm not the right person to talk about the OneWeb terminal. There are others in Hughes who are better at talking about that. So I'd be talking out of ignorance. What I can say from a GEO perspective, as I mentioned in my brief presentation, we're just really focused on getting the best possible price performance ratio. And we think we can continue to drive that ratio for the better over the next several years. And that's going to be, I think, one of the key differences between GEO and NGSO.
Sure, of course. One final quick question. HNS is really vertically integrated in the Americas and I believe also in India, but you're not a satellite operator in India due to regulatory constraints. But is there any plans at HNS to expand out to Asia to do a Jupiter type of satellite over the Asia Pacific or Africa, where you would also vertically integrate those markets as well?
Well, when it comes to Africa and Middle East, we have a joint venture with Yahsat for the YahClick service, and so we're all in on that. When it comes to Asia, we don't have any plans to go alone. We would go with partners, and so we'd like to do something in Asia, but again, it would be in partnership with somebody who is, or multiple people who are already in the region.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.